Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Please join me and rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The alternative was me singing the national anthem, so appreciate it. I'd like to start the meeting by introducing the Board of Selectmen. And with that, we have our newest member, Peter Smith, Tracy Post, Chairman Mark Forrest, Mike Stone, and Dan Horgan. We also, at that table, have our Town Council, Jay Tallerman, our Town Administrator, Robert Rittenauer, and our Assistant Town Administrator, Bill Scott. I'd like to give a special shout out to Bill Scott for the presentation material that he has put together. The guy is pretty phenomenal, but I'll leave it at that. I don't want his head to get too big. He's a welcome addition to the town, sincerely. The Finance Committee, we have, in Brian Gardner's absence, we have Stephanie Cox as the acting chair. George Perkins is the acting vice chair. Jack Moylan is here. Robert Shavara and Sarah Coles. Okay. I'll now move to Chairman Forrest for an opening comment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the entire Board of Selectmen, I want to thank you and welcome you to our fall special town meeting. We are pleased to be able to conduct our town meeting in a safe manner in this very spacious auditorium, and we are very pleased to see such a good turnout here tonight so that we can address some very important issues facing our community. So I'd just like to make a few comments about the warrant. First of all, tonight we will take care of, in the first article, some cleanup items from the previous fiscal year, and in the next article, Article 2, we will address the need for improvements to our water supply pumping stations, which are critical to providing clean drinking water to the residents of Yarmouth. Following that, Articles 4, 5, and 6 are designed to sustain our progress as a community towards cleaning up the water in our coastal embayments. I think here, as everyone knows, clean water is not only a top priority, but it's a critical priority. And clean water has enormous impacts, both in terms of public health and in terms of the prosperity of our own community here. After years of study, we already know today that a centralized wastewater treatment system is a key component of our overall wastewater plan. It is the primary way to address the excessive amounts of nitrogen that are degrading and seriously compromising the town's water resources. So tonight's articles, tonight's actions on these items are critical and bring us closer to that goal of protecting our water resources. This evening, we will be asking for your support to put in place the financial mechanisms to develop the first phase of our comprehensive wastewater plan. Our plan will have little to no financial impact on residential taxpayers. In addition, we will also seek your approval for the cost of designing a treatment facility here in Yarmouth that will allow this cleanup program to move forward. While we continue to work with our neighbors, it's become clear that Yarmouth needs to take the first steps. We need to act first. And in doing so, we will still pursue regional strategies while we aggressively pursue state and federal support. Our actions tonight will move us forward on the first phase of our overall comprehensive wastewater plan and set the groundwork for this important cleanup to begin. You will also see on the warrant articles that make further improvements to our recreational facilities through the use of CPA funds. And finally, we have several important articles brought tonight by the Planning Board. So as we move through the 17 articles presented here this evening, you will see a renewed emphasis from both our staff and our volunteers to make a thorough and well-organized presentation of information that incorporates the tremendous amount of thoughtful consideration and hard work that has gone into the proposals that are presented to you here for action tonight. So once again, on behalf of the entire Board of Selectmen, I want to recognize and thank you for being here this evening. I also want to thank and recognize all the hard work that has gone into the preparation for this town meeting, and we very much look forward to the discussion and answering any and all questions regarding these important matters before you tonight. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few housekeeping articles, and hopefully you pretty much should be able to see the guidance on the screen. I'm not going to read every single one of them, and many of you have been to town meetings before, and most of these are pretty basic. I should acknowledge that there's 2 microphones in the aisles, so please approach them when you have a question or a comment. The one item on that list that I do want to highlight is if there is an amended motion, we need to have that put in writing. We will provide the writing materials. I think we have an Etch-a-Sketch for you to be able to do that. In addition, I had forgotten to introduce Mary Malinowski, our town clerk, who's really my guardian angel here. So acknowledging Mary, who's a great person to be associated with. So before we start the articles, thank you. Yep, absolutely. Just a quick observation from my perspective as I think about this. Is the 3rd town meeting that I've been moderator for. And I was given some thought, and just from a personal standpoint, the only town I've ever lived in when we moved down here is Yarmouth. I spent my entire life living in cities. And I think like every single one of us, not a day goes by where something doesn't impact us that we say, you know, a rule or a regulation or an ordinance, and we say, what were they thinking? Or on the other hand, boy, somebody was really smart a number of years ago. And when I think about that from living in a city standpoint, it used to be the answer to that was attributed to them or him or her. In a town, I figured this out after a while, you probably already know this, the answer is attributed to us. And you go, that's a pretty scary thought. But it's a lot scarier thought to attribute it to them or him or her. So I note that because we have some of the decisions, and Chairman Forrest referenced some long-term decisions that will be lasting. And they go all the way from our water quality to getting a tattoo. So I think it's very important to emphasize that it's us guys that are going to make those decisions. So us guys should move on to Article 1. And I'll introduce Selectman Dan Horgan for Article 1.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd move Article 1 as printed in the warrant.
Do we have a second? Second.
Board of Selectmen recommend unanimously, Mr. Moderator.
Finance Committee?
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Okay. Explanation?
Thank you. This article authorizes the payment of invoices associated with prior year FY 2021 expenses that were not able to be paid before the closing of the books for the FY 2021. The invoices are associated with disposal of construction and demolition materials, as well as trash disposal. These costs are covered by the revenues already received from users of the Yarmouth disposal area.
Questions? Hearing none. This is a 9/10 vote. So we'll take a, did you say I should do a voice vote? We'll take a voice vote. All in favor? All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Article 2.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd move to raise and appropriate and transfer from available funds in the DPW Water Division retained earnings the sum of $1,967,200 rather than the amount of $2,700,000 as printed in the warrant for capital expenses of the Water Division pursuant to the Acts of 1928, Chapter 146, or under the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 69B, for purposes as printed in the warrant.
Do we have a second? Second. Further explanation?
Board of Selectmen recommend unanimously. Mr. Moderator, this article includes capital funding for the Water Division to fund Phase 2 of the reconstruction of several water pump stations. Funds for this capital item come from the Water Retained Earnings account, which are funds that are derived from the water fees. Mr. Moderator, due to a recent bid result, the amount requested is lower than the article. To explain the article and the new number, I'd respectfully request that Laurie Rosalia, the wastewater superintendent, be recognized to speak on the matter.
So recognized.
Hello, thank you for letting me explain the article. So this is about Phase 2 pump station improvements, but I wanted to give the town a quick update on Phase 1, which you approved at special town meeting last year for construction. Phase 1 included pump stations 1 through 13. It included roof replacements, asbestos abatement, bulkhead installation, and then some electrical and HVAC work. The roofs, the asbestos, and the bulkheads, which give us access to some of the lower levels, have all been completed at this point, and we're just working on some electrical and HVAC upgrades at the moment, and we hope to be done by the end of November. So moving on to what we're asking for this evening, it's Phase 2, which includes pump stations 14 to 24. And it's very similar to Phase 1, with the exception we don't have any asbestos and we don't have to do those basement access. So it's roof and trim replacements, new doors, HVAC upgrades, and then painting of the interior of the buildings. As Selectman Horgan mentioned, we took the project to bid a couple weeks ago, so we have a lower price that we will be asking for tonight. So the bid came in at just around $1.5 million, a bit less than the construction engineer's estimate. So with a contingency and engineering construction services, that's where we come up with the $1,967,200 that we're asking for tonight. So, that's just a quick summary of the Phase 2 improvements, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I neglected to ask the Finance Committee's recommendation on this.
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question.
Please introduce yourself and your precinct, thanks.
Sorry.
Even though I know you're
Joseph Goldstein, Precinct 5. The only question I have is, after these expenditures, how much will be left in the reserve?
Mr. Colby or Ms. Rosala?
Well, it's about $1.5 million that will be left in the reserves.
Does that answer the question?
It's about $1.5 million.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Okay. This is a majority vote. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Article 3, again read by Mr. Horgan.
Mr. Moderator, I'd move Article 3 as printed in the warrant.
Do we have a second? The second's been made. Board of Selectmen, recommendation.
Unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Thank you. Explanation.
The town leases various equipment and buildings. We currently have town meeting approval to lease these items for up to 5 years. To provide greater flexibility and secure the best deal for the town, we'd ask to be allowed to bid the items listed for a period of up to 10 years.
Questions? Hearing no questions, this requires a 2/3 majority vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. The motion carries. Thank you. In the meantime, I was supposed to have read that this town warrant was legally posted and advertised in accordance with the town charter and general laws. So requirement. Article 4, Selectman Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen recommends by a vote of 5-0.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends by a vote of 5-0.
Explanation.
The Water Resource Advisory Committee recommends the adoption of this fund as a mechanism to pay the debt service and operation costs of implementing the town's wastewater plans. This fund is separate and distinct from other town funds and operating budget and can only be used for operations, maintenance, improvements, and investments to municipal wastewater assets and debt service as may be required.
Questions? Comments? Hearing. Do we have a question?
Vita Morris, Precinct 1. I want to make a statement with regard to all of these 3 articles, and it has to do with a mailing that was put out by what seemingly was, the town committee on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, since the committee was formed by the selectmen. It was most irregular.
With all due respect, I don't believe that mailing is pertinent to these 3 articles. The mailing, there is a process in place. The process
This talks about these articles.
specific to the mailing.
Yes.
There's a process in place, and the process will flow through normal procedures.
Meaning what?
That is not pertinent to what's written in the articles.
Well, I cannot understand why a comment cannot be made about this. This pertained to a most irregular kind of mailing, and
That
the
issue
cost
is
of
not-
and it cost the taxpayers more than $9,000.
That issue is
And
not
who
that
approved
issue.
it?
It's a different route to conclusion.
Where?
Not subject to the special town meeting warrant.
Oh, so I have to go back to the Board of Selectmen to deal with that?
You certainly don't have the status to address it at this special town meeting. Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Yes, sir. Oh, no, I'm sorry, he's cleaning off the thing. Hearing none, this is a majority vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Article 5.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 5 is printed in the warrant.
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen recommends by a vote of 5-0.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Explanation.
The town is proposing to start to fund the wastewater enterprise fund using several sources from free cash generated by the short-term rental tax, the septage host fee, and septage betterment payments. Similar sources will be used in the future to provide funding for this account. These funds can be used for funding the costs associated in construction relating to future municipal wastewater, including possible debt service. This article relates to the above authorization, the previous article, Article 4, for a wastewater fund, as it provides revenue to fund the account. As the wastewater projects are developed, this article is meant to provide the initial funding for capital investments. Future use of the enterprise fund, as per Article 4, will include operations as cited in that article.
Questions? Comments?
Both Article 5 and Article 6 are funding something that we know or have no idea what it's going to be. So it's basically, we're blind in terms of what are we funding. We're funding a proposed water treatment plant that there's been no real clarification other than location, what it's going to entail. We're about to embark on a generational proposal, one that will take well over 25 to 30 years to even have any impact on this community. And yet, we're already putting in, if I read this correctly, almost $10 million of funds in order to fund something that we don't even know or doesn't exist. I find it ludicrous at the least and absurd at the most. We have never gotten a full explanation, in my mind, as to why we haven't pursued Barnstable's water treatment plant and partner with them. We were doing it with Dennis and Harwich up to 4 months ago, and then guess what? Dennis didn't want to do it. What a surprise. They've always been such a reliable partner that you've invested time and money on it. I find this is just a ridiculous set of circumstances, and I support voting both at Article 4, 5, and 6 down. Thank you.
For the record, Article 4 has already been passed. Here. Any further questions? Because I might want to defer to Town Administrator to respond. Question?
Richard Donovan.
Go ahead.
Richard Donovan, Precinct 7. Just curious as to what the current balance is in the free cash short-term rental revenue fund is, and how long it took to accumulate that?
Okay. Mr. Rittenauer?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Short-term rental revenues from the previous fiscal year totaled the $1,342,732, And as part of our multi-phased financial plan that avoids placing this item on the property taxes, we have pledged that in future years, the short-term rental revenues will be used to help fund the wastewater. So we're collecting at this point that approximately $1.3 million per year, and that is a portion of the town's total free cash that was certified at $9.6 million this year. And a couple of other points I might raise, that there were a few inconsistencies with the previous speaker's remarks in terms of taking 30 years to start to address the problems with the water quality in our coastal embayments. That is entirely incorrect. That by moving forward with this process now in this project, what we're implementing is phase 1 of a critical program that under Article 6, there's a detailed presentation that I think everyone will find has a great deal of information in exactly what phase 1 is about. And the other item that I want to stress is that in our multi-phased plan, we are in active discussions with the town of Barnstable for future regional efforts to work together. And we will continue to work with the town of Dennis in future phases when we begin to bring more of the residences into this. We fully anticipate that we'll have regional partnerships, but in order to be a solid regional partner, the one thing that we've learned is Yarmouth needs to take those initial steps on its own to establish our foundation of starting to meet these critical wastewater needs to improve water quality. And when we're capable of moving ahead with this first phase, that will be the point in the subsequent phases where we'll be able to work closer with the regional partners, and we'll make sure that we get the best value that the region can offer. And just a couple of points. And the last item is that please be aware, Articles 4, 5, and 6 each have a critical role in keeping the town on its current schedule to begin to address this problem and have something in place by 2026. If we lose this opportunity, we won't have the design that we need to gain some of the financing mechanisms, such as the 0% financing that we're able to do on this project. So it's critical this evening that these interim steps be approved so that we can keep on track.
We have another question.
First of all, I'd like to echo a lot of what Mr. Goldstein said ahead of me. I think it would be very interesting to know how many people here present tonight have any idea what the cost of just the first phase of this whole project is. And I can the last one I heard, I think, was $166 million. And we were being told verbally that this will not require any increase in the taxpayers' real estate taxes, which it sounds like La La Land to me, but at least the powers that be had the good sense not to put it in writing. They could be held liable, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Hello. Yeah, John McHale, down in South Yarmouth. So I'm looking around here and I'm seeing a lot of older people, kind of like me, and my taxes are, in my opinion, high, and they've risen and risen. And I look to see, we got that big new school being built, and the highway department, I think that's a highway department over there in Buck Island, and these numbers are absolutely astronomical, and I'm thinking, well, there's no way my taxes aren't going to go up, and with inflation and all that stuff. And the gentleman over there mentioned that what we will see out of this will be taking place in 25 years, or 30 years. Not many of us will be there. And so I feel like we've helped out the younger people of the town quite a bit. with the new school, and, you know, there's certain emergency things that need to take place. I'm just wondering if maybe this could wait another 10, 15, 25 years. Well, okay, so maybe it's another emergency. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Jim Saban, Precinct 7. I promised my wife I wouldn't get up here and say anything today, but I'm sorry, we cannot wait any longer.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, my name is Rick Bishop, Precinct 7. I'm also the Executive Director of the Friends of Bass River. And Jimmy is absolutely right, we cannot wait. There are parts of Bass River that are so ill because of nitrogen, the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries has prohibited it for shell fishing and fishing. It is absolutely a disaster. In 2003 and through 2008, the Mass Estuaries Program studied the water quality of Bass River. It's the vaunted MEP study. The Friends of Bass River in 2020 began a comprehensive water sampling program that we've continued for 2 years. We partnered with the Center for Coastal Studies and Stonehill College. And I can tell you absolutely, the nitrogen problem has not improved. It is incrementally increasing every year, and we must work on this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, we'll move towards a vote. All in favor of Article 5? All opposed? The article passes. Article 6 will also be Selectman Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town appropriates $4,500,000 to pay cost of designing, engineering, permitting, owner's project management services, site testing, and constructing a wastewater treatment plant in the town of Yarmouth, including the payment of all other expenses incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, subsection 1, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any premium received upon the sale of any of the bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. In order to carry out this project, the Board of Selectmen is authorized to accept any and all state aid, grants, or other revenue that may become available for this work.
Thank you. Board of Selectmen?
The Board of Selectmen recommends by a vote of 5-0.
Finance Committee?
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Thank you. And we have, did you want to make a presentation?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. The determination...
did we have a second? Okay.
The determination to proceed with the Yarmouth treatment option for the wastewater project initiated the return to the clean water reclamation facility location in Yarmouth. The Buck Island Road treatment location has been part of the planning process throughout the project. These funds are to be used for paying the costs associated with design and engineering of a clean water reclamation facility that is anticipated to be constructed at 99 Buck Island Road. This facility will treat wastewater from Yarmouth to a very high level prior to discharge back into the aquifer. This facility will allow the town of Yarmouth to address nitrogen contamination in our impaired embayments, which include Lewis Bay, Parkers River, and Bass River. Commensurate with required procedures, a capital account is typically created to receive and expend the borrowing. Mr. Moderator, I would respectfully request that Stephanie Cox of the Finance Committee be recognized to speak to the need of this article, after which Jeff Colby The Public Works Director will provide a presentation.
Thank you, Selectman Stone. I recognize Stephanie Cox.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow Yarmouth residents. This is the next step in moving forward on Phase 1. It's a necessary step on moving forward on Phase 1 of our comprehensive wastewater management plan, and the Finance Committee endorses and supports moving forward, have for quite some time, and that position hasn't changed. Back over the summer, we wrote a letter to the Board of Selectmen urging them to move forward with this warrant article for this fall town meeting. And we have a similar statement on page 1 of your warrant, which I won't bore you by reading verbatim, but I will tell you briefly why the Finance Committee endorses this article along with the rest of the wastewater articles we just voted on. First is the issue of Route 28 that's going to happen in Phase 1. That is a situation where circumstances outside of our control, the state has rules when they open up Route 28 that it can't be opened up back again for another 5 years. And the cost of every year that we delay in putting shovels in the ground, the cost of construction goes up 3 to 5%. So that's $5 million a year. And if you think about waiting another 5 years, that's another $25 million. So each time we kick the can down the road, the costs go up for when we actually eventually put shovels in the ground and build sewers. A third reason is that we need to position ourselves for other sources of funds that will take the burden off of you, the taxpayers, whether that be federal funds for infrastructure, state funds, or even county funds that are paid for through short-term rentals. And then the fourth piece is that doing nothing really is not a choice in this situation. There is a federal lawsuit from the Conservation Law Foundation, the State Department of Environmental Protection, as well as EPA, have requirements. We have to meet the law. We are out of compliance with the law with this environmental pollution. And if we wait for a federal judge, or if we wait for the state to impose a solution on us, then the chances are that they will impose a solution that is far more costly, because it'll force everyone to be on sewer, or everyone to upgrade, where not everyone may need to, and it will compress the timeline from 30 years to maybe 5 years. That's incredibly expensive to the taxpayers. So we don't have a choice. We have to take action, and we have to determine our own fates here. Thirdly, the impact on residential taxpayers. I've heard folks speak tonight about that and concerns about that. Well, our commercial tax rate has dropped from 18% to 5% over a decade. And so as that happens, the overall budget that you all have to pay for as residents, the burden shifts to you. So that's why it's so important that we stop losing our commercial tax base and we grow it, so that when we are faced with future annual town meetings, that you're not having to choose between raising your own taxes and cutting services like police and fire. And also, in terms of that impact on us as taxpayers, the environment is our economy. And if we don't have good water quality, then nobody's going to want to come here. That's going to have a deleterious effect on the tourism industry here in the town of Yarmouth. And lastly, the cost of doing this parcel by parcel is greater to homeowners. I, in the past couple of weeks, spoke to the Department of Environmental Protection, Barnstable Clean Water Coalition that's piloting some alternative IA systems, and the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, the trifecta of authorities on wastewater. And all of them said that alternative systems are not approved to get down to the level needed to be within compliance of the law. They may get better in time, and that's why people are piloting them in other towns, but they're not going to help us in areas of density and along Route 28, and they're not going to be a solution for right now. And the other challenge here is that if we were to do this parcel by parcel, individual homeowner by individual homeowner, This is only getting at one contaminant, nitrogen. When it comes to our wastewater concern, that only addresses saltwater. Freshwater is affected by phosphorus from our wastewater as well. And as you probably have noticed, a lot of ponds have been closed. So there's going to come a time, probably pretty soon, when we need to address that as well. There's also contaminants of emerging concern, such as PFOS and PFOA. And imagine spending $35,000 or some other figure on a new IA system, a new septic system, and then finding out that the state is requiring you to do something more to upgrade it. Whereas if we do this as a treatment system, as a sewer system, then we only have to fix it once on the back end, and we can plan for that. So all of these reasons combined, we feel that this is absolutely the right next step for the town of Yarmouth, and the Finance Committee wholeheartedly recommends. I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Colby for a further presentation.
Thank you. Is Mr. Colby here? Jeff?
Yes, over here,
Last
Mr. Moderator.
in the disposal area with his chainsaw, so I think he made it over here.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thanks.
Jeff Colby, your Public Works Director. I'd like to provide some more detail about what you're being asked to fund tonight and a little bit about the plan. Obviously, there's some questions about that I think this presentation will answer. This is a breakdown of the $4.5 million. It is for the treatment plant design and owner's project management services. That's what the OPM stands for. There's preliminary design and final design. There's permitting that's necessary as part of this treatment. And there's also bid phase services. So this will allow us to bring a bid to this meeting for your approval, similar to what we did with the water infrastructure. We had a bid that was lower than the engineer's estimate, and we brought that to you, and you were able to approve that this evening in Article 2. So a similar approach could be done here, and this is the breakdown of what that would fund. A little bit about the plan itself. You heard earlier that this is a partnership with Mass DOT. They have some plans for doing work along Route 28. What you'll see on this slide is that the yellow is anticipated Mass DOT projects along Route 28. And so we're looking to get the backbone of our wastewater infrastructure in the ground as part of those projects. That will save millions of dollars for the taxpayers of Yarmouth. This diagram also shows Lewis Bay, Parkers River, and Bass River. The red numbers are the septic system nitrogen that needs to be removed from those polluted embayments. And so that just gives you an idea of what the magnitude of the problem is. Also, Route 28 serves as the spine, which would set up the stages for future phases. Future phases will feed into this backbone, the spine within Route 28. And the plant is located at the center in a great location with regards to this facility. You can see that the plant is at the top of this diagram with the star, very convenient in which to pump the wastewater to get treated and then be disposed of. A little bit more detail on what that looks like. This is the location. Currently, it's the plant location is the water offices, if you've been there to pay a bill or just to request water to be turned off or turned on. That's the location at 99 Buck Island Road. It's shown in the yellow circle at the top of the screen there. That is south of Buck Island Road, but north of Route 28. As you can see from this diagram, it's well buffered with existing vegetation. The site is already used for wastewater purposes. We have a septic facility in Yarmouth, which we've had for about 30 years. And once the effluent is treated, that treatment happens up on Workshop Road, but the treated clean water is discharged at this site currently. So that's why you can see there's a clearing at this location, because it is disposed of at that location. Also, this facility would have enhanced nitrogen and odor removal technology that's part of that. Again, this is a design and owner's project manager funding, so we'll refine these concepts and get a better idea of what the cost is with regard to the overall plan once this is funded. So you hear me talk about the owner's project manager, just a little brief information on that. An owner's project manager is an important part of the process. The state requires that building projects in excess of $1.5 million have an owner's project manager. What that owner's project manager will provide is value engineering, oversight of the design, and help us maintain the schedule. You've heard about some needs to be aggressive with regard to our schedule, so the owner's project manager will help with that. Cost estimating, making sure we have the best cost as we go through the process and up into the bidding, as well as project evaluations throughout the project will be part of their responsibility. A little bit more detail on what the design that you're being asked to fund tonight is. And this is update and complete plans, complete permitting with the regulatory agencies. That's task number 3. And as I mentioned before, the bidding services, which will allow us to bring a detailed number to town meeting. With that said, here's a little bit about the nitrogen challenge. It provides for excess nutrients in the environment, and what that does is allow for algae growth as well as fish kill in some areas. And here's just a brief overview of septic systems and how that impacts our environment. With that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the overall plan and what you're being asked to fund. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Colby. Questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Vita Morris, this owner's project management, does that include the services of the consultant?
Both the designer and the owner's project manager would be what I consider consultants. They are third parties that are typically professional engineering services that provide design and project management oversight. So yes.
If change were to be made in the person or persons involved here, it would have to be done at this stage?
Once this funding is approved, if that's what this body does tonight, we will have a competitive process in which to select both the designer as well as the owner's project manager for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Other question?
I'd just like to say, James
Please
Quirk,
introduce yourself.
James Quirk, Precinct 7.
Thanks.
I've been coming to town meeting here since John Sears Jr. was the moderator, and we used to do it in the high school. In the 1970s, we started talking about wastewater. At the time we started that conversation, the estimated cost was $1.8 million, and it was going to be funded by federal grants. Now we're in 2021, still talking. We can't keep kicking this thing down the road.
Thank you.
My name is Ashley Mailer. I'm sorry, but I don't know my precinct yet. May I still ask a question?
Yes. I didn't hear.
I just don't know my precinct number. I am, yes.
Okay.
I was just wondering if somebody could maybe elaborate on the odor control methods that were mentioned. I completely agree that something needs to be done. I fully support, making moves to address this problem. But I know that around the Exit 8 area, because of the Workshop Road facility, it gets pretty stinky on some days. And I'm just curious if our future work will have any further controls on that. I know, in Barnstable, you can tell when you're passing the wastewater treatment facility. Not sure if it will be more so on Buck Island when that's moved. Just curious.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I'm happy to answer that question. The details will be worked out during the design phase as far as what specific technologies will be selected, but I will tell you that all of the newer treatment facilities have enhanced odor control. Some of the typical products are activated granular carbon and those types of technologies in which they sequester the odors and then don't escape. And so that's part of the process, and the details will be worked out through the design.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question?
Or just a comment. My name is Brian Braggington Smith, Precinct 6, and I've been talking about this and the need to do this for longer than I care to mention. It's about time we get off the block and start doing something about it. But the bottom line here is that we're in the 21st century. It's no longer the 20th century. With what we do, we've got a plan for that 21st century reality. Water is a critical issue, and I can tell you right now that Mill Creek is in trouble from a standpoint of its hydrology. And that we better get cautious and we better get sensitive to this, because we have a responsibility to protect our environment and to prepare our environment for future generations. This article has to be passed. We can work out the details and work out the numbers as the final details are hammered out, but this has to happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take one more question.
Yes, Dave Healy, Precinct 7. As we go ahead, and it looks like we'd be approving this, I just want the Board of Selectmen and the people who will follow them to make sure that we hold the feet to the fire of our neighbors across the river. If they don't want to play the game now, their fair share has got to be high, because we're taking all the risks and they're sitting back trying to enjoy it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. I think we've come to a time for a vote. This requires a 2/3 majority vote. Article 6, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. A fish just smiled. Article 7, select person post.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 7 is printed in the warrant.
Second. I hear a second. Board of Selectmen.
The Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Explanation.
The explanation is the Massachusetts Division of Local Service Information Guideline Release, otherwise known as the IGR, number 16-102, outlines the specific process to create a special revenue fund. Both the article language and the motion result from the above report. Such fund will provide more options to fund capital projects and the required funding to both the school district and to the local access cable provider.
Questions? Comments? Hearing none. Take a vote. This is a majority vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Article 8, Select Women Post.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 8 to transfer and appropriate $1,700,000 from the Community Preservation Undesignated Fund balance for purposes as printed in the warrant, such appropriation being subject to the execution of a grant agreement as printed in the warrant.
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Did we hear a second? Yeah, thank you. Explanation?
I'd also like to make note that the Community Preservation Committee recommends this article as well. The explanation is the article authorizes funding to pay for final design and construction of Phase 1 improvements to the Sandy Pond Recreation Area. These improvements include an inclusive playground and splash pad that will provide recreational opportunities for able-bodied and physically challenged youth. The concept plans for this project have been unanimously supported by the Recreation Commission. And Mr. Moderator, I would like to respectfully request Mr. Jeff Colby, the Public Works Director, be recognized to provide a presentation, after which Debbie Clark from the Recreation Commission and CPC will provide a statement of support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Colby?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to give a little more detail on this article, just like the previous one for Article 6. This is a breakdown with regards to the funding for the $1.7 million. Again, it's an inclusive playground and splash pad. This is the location. It's at Sandy Pond, which you can see at the bottom of the screen is Buck Island Road. Once you enter into Sandy Pond, the softball is straight ahead, and if you veer to the right, you circle around to where there is basketball, tennis courts, as well as a bathroom facility, restroom facilities. And this is in the blue circled area is roughly the area that we're talking about proposing this facility. This is a breakdown with regards to the improvements. There is money in here for not only the inclusive playground and inclusive splash pad, which means it's available for both physically challenged as well as able-bodied people to use. But there is a cost in here associated with a contingency at this very early stage of the project of 25%. And we also need to finish the engineering and design of this facility, and that's included in this funding as well. Again, as mentioned before, it's entirely funded with CPA funds. The schedule is where this winter we are anticipating having final design plans being developed. We'll work with the Recreation Commission on making sure that all of the features are consistent with the intentions for this type of facility. And if all goes well, we'll be able to bid this out in early 2022. A little more detail with regards to that specific area that I mentioned before. The yellow highlighted area is roughly the area for the inclusive playground features, the equipment for all. There is a small component in the blue that would be the splash pad. That would be for physically challenged people to cool off in the summertime. That's where that would be able to happen, but certainly the major component of this project is the inclusive playground. Again, we continue to use that reference inclusive because it's for all children of all ages and abilities to play and interact together. So with that said, here's the typical equipment that is anticipated for this type of facility to give you a better idea of what is being proposed. And with that said, I'd like to turn the microphone over to the next speaker.
Ms. Clark is recognized.
Debbie Clark from West Yarmouth. Tonight I am speaking in support of Article 8, which will provide funding for a much-needed inclusive playground and splash pad in West Yarmouth. I personally know so many people that will benefit from this project. These are families with handicapped children and young adults who are unable to enjoy many of the playgrounds that we have in town. I know that this playground and splash pad will bring so much pleasure to these families and will bring joy to all the kids at the playground. Just think about the smiles and the laughs this will bring to everyone. I have been on the Rec Commission for 32 years. This is a project, is something that we have been talking about for a long time, and we need to take action. This park is something that is very close and dear to my heart, and I hope you will support this effort and vote in favor of Article 8. Thank you.
Thank you. Time for questions.
Vita Morris. The splash pad, is that the top left-hand side picture?
Response.
A splash pad would be the shaded blue area. Is that what your question is?
I would just like to see what the splash pad looks like, is what I'm asking you. And
So yeah, the upper left-hand corner would be consistent with a feature of a splash pad, absolutely.
And when we don't see the where the feet are, do we? Is that the pad? That's where the pad is. In any event, I would like to make a motion that this article be postponed to the spring, because there are, I think, some of us are very concerned about the liability that we are exposing ourselves to. There have been some reports in instances where these splash pads are in place already of either accidents happening or hygienic problems, or in one instance in particular in Texas where a child contracted a brain-eating amoeba from using the splash pad and died, of course. I mean, it's a hideous thing, and I think we just need a little bit more information before we proceed with this splash pad part of this whole project. So I would like to propose that this article be postponed until the spring.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Well, good. I believe we can take a vote on the motion to postpone. Let me just hold on for a second. I just want to make sure we follow the procedures. We're going to take a vote on the motion to postpone. Pardon? Is there discussion, further discussion?
Norm Holcomb, Precinct 1. I would oppose the motion to postpone. I frequently travel to Spokane, Washington to visit my grandkids. And it's a much bigger community, but they have wonderful parks and beautiful splash pads in the parks. They attract an enormous number of young children and are a great benefit to the community. And I think we ought to move ahead with this. I don't know why Sandy Pond was necessarily chosen as the site. We have other parks in town, but if the Recreation Commission believes that is most centrally located for that purpose, that's fine. But I think that this will be a great asset to the community, and I hope we'll move forward with it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I do have a comment. Brian Braggington Smith, Precinct 6, and the name Braggington Smith is connected to the Sandy Pond site going way back. And when it was taken by eminent domain from the family, it was taken for clean water and for access to a freshwater beach. It was understood that it was to be maintained as kind of a natural environment. I absolutely support the idea of recreational activities and having facilities to be able to support that, but I'm a little bit concerned about the cost, for one thing, and we just approved something like $10 million worth of spending here on wastewater. And as I mentioned earlier in my comment, the Mill Creek watershed is in desperate shape. Bayview Street Beach, the hydrology has collapsed. It's been collapsed. In 2006, the culvert that fed that stream, that kept that beach in place, collapsed. And the town has done nothing to correct that. The hydrology has been starved for the Mill Creek watershed due to the excessive amount of water withdrawn there by the Barnstable Water Company and unfortunately from Yarmouth, because the entire west lobe of the Mill Creek is now dry. And that was the source water that ran through the cranberry bog that fed that stream and creek at Bayview Street Beach. So we're in dire shape, and before we go spending a whole bunch of money on flashy splash pads that are only going to be used a couple of months a year, we should correct what we've damaged and put the stuff back in shape that needs to be in shape so that the future will be survivable. We've done damage and we need to fix it. The wastewater plant is one step, but we've got some issues that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. So another comment was,
Hi, I'm Dawn Roche, a Yarmouth resident, precinct number 2, a mother of 2. My daughter's 28, special needs. She's with me tonight. To pass this is so important for their development, for their confidence, for their fine motor skills, for their cognitive skills, exercise their minds, their bodies, their healthier habits, but more importantly, their acceptance into the community without being judged. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Shavara, did you have a question?
Robert Savara, Precinct 6. Just a little bit of point of information. Number one, I expect that because there's no recycling on this, that if there's a drought, it would be shut off, right? It only works like for 3 months of the year, which is the person behind me mentioned. I don't believe that it can be done for $7,000 per year in operating costs. And a point of information, the Capital Budget Committee did vote 5-1 against. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment on the motion to postpone.
Dorcas McGurran, Precinct 5. I move the question.
Okay, thank you. The motion is to postpone. All in favor of the motion to postpone, say aye. All opposed? The motion to postpone fails. The motion is alive. Are there any further comments on the motion, the CPA-funded Article number 8? Mr. Goldstein.
Joe Goldstein, Precinct 5. I just have a few questions. We have previously approved the design and for 3 splash pads in Yarmouth. This is but 1. I was wondering what the plans are for the other 2 that we've already paid for the design with CPA money, I might add. The other question I have, if I looked at the picture of where the park was going to be, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kobe, but it appears that that's going to eliminate a picnic area with barbecue pits that are currently there. If that is the case, what are we going to do for those people who frequently use it both as a party destination and as just a place to go eat? Because there is no other picnic area within that entire complex. The last question I'm going to pose is, we have a gate on the entrance to Sandy Pond. It is never used. It is not locked. Sandy Pond area right now is being used as a I won't say teenage, a party area after dark. It is my suggestion that we start locking the gate so that we can eliminate the damage that is being done by the party people, as well as the possible damage of any new investments that we make there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask either Mr. Colby or Ms. Hall to respond. I don't believe that your first part of your question was pertinent to the article, per se, but I'll ask Jeff to respond.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I can respond to that. Previous money that was appropriated for splash pad was for study, and to the extent that there was any remaining balance, which there was for some of those studies, it was returned. This is the only splash pad anticipated for or planned for the town of Yarmouth. The second part of that question was with regards to the picnic area. As you can see from this diagram, there is a green area immediately behind the restroom facility. That's anticipated not only for a place for people to rest and watch their kids, but also to have a picnic or have picnic tables as well. So we'll work closely with the Recreation Commission to make sure that those uses are all managed appropriately as part of the design process.
Okay, is there one more question?
Yes. Hi, Michelle Giardino Glanville, Precinct 5. I have been a Yarmouth resident for the vast majority of my life. I am the mother of a special needs young adult, good Lord, and I'm also a nurse in our local emergency room. And one thing about inclusive playgrounds and play areas is it's not just about making the area inclusive and accessible to the children and the young adults, but also to their guardians. Our town is an aging town. Many grandparents are now having to raise their children. This inclusive playground area will allow them to be able to take their charges to these places and enjoy them. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor of Article 8, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Registered. The motion carries. Thank you. I want to digress for a second before we move on to the zoning articles. A few people may have noticed we had a little storm last week, and I'd like to acknowledge the first responders in town who, and I live on a fairly remote street, they were out there at 7 o'clock in the morning with backhoes, police, fire, DPW. Thank you very much. I also can't not acknowledge Mr. Bob Lawton, who's not only been there, done that, but will probably do more even in the future. And want to acknowledge the transition that I'll thank him for, because I know Bob Rittenauer undoubtedly has. And he's always there, and we hope he's always here. Thank you. Okay, can I move on to, I got to. Article 9 is also select person post.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 9 is printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Select Board?
Select Board recommends unanimously.
Finance Committee?
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Thank you. Explanation?
On a regular basis, the town reviews bonding articles which have been completed, and there is a balance left to be borrowed. The town's policy is to rescind the unneeded balances to clear our books.
Questions? Comments? Hearing none. It's a majority vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Article 10, select person Peter Smith.
Thank you. I move to transfer $100,000 from the golf retained earnings for the capital expenditures described in the warrant.
Do we have a second? Okay. Select Board?
Select Board recommend 5-0.
Finance Committee?
Finance Committee recommends 5-0.
Thank you. Explanation?
This article includes capital funding for the golf division to fund the replacement of the cart barn, room, trim, and siding, along with the clubhouse siding and window replacement. Funds for this capital item comes from the golf retained earning account, which was derived from golf fees. Mr. Moderator, the golf course director and the member of the golf committee are available to speak if necessary.
Questions? Comments? Yes, sir.
Richard Donovan, Precinct 7. I am in favor of this article. However, I would like to know what the balance of the golf retained earnings account is, and is this a number that somebody of the general public could find on the town's website or financial reports? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rittenauer, would you like to respond to that? Or defer?
Yes,
to
I would. Bear with me for 1 second.
Mr. Centio is available also if he's got the ready answer.
Okay. The current balance in the golf fund retained earnings is $1,973,030.
Does that answer the question? Okay. I think we have another question. Yeah.
So asked if that was a number that could be found somewhere on the town's website or financial reports.
Mr. Rittenauer?
You know, I don't believe that number is up on our website. It has been recently received from the Department of Revenue, but we'll put that up on the website and make sure that's available.
Great.
Oh. Yes, it is on the finance page. Mr. Centio corrects me, as always.
And if you have trouble navigating the computer, contact Bill Scott. He'll help you. The guy's awesome. So, any further questions, comments? This is a majority vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Article 11, Mr. Smith.
I move Article 11 as printed in the warrant.
Do we have a second? Did I hear a second? Okay. I don't hear so good. Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen recommends 5-0.
And this was the planning board recommended 7-0. Explanation?
Mr. Moderator, I would like to defer to the planning board representative and staff who will explain this article.
Mr. Moderator, Joanne Crowley, Chair of the Planning Board.
Recognize Joanne Crowley.
This article includes amendments related to development within flood zones and are necessary to maintain the town's eligibility in the National Flood Insurance Program, also known as NFIP. This program is managed by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and enables homeowners, businesses, and renters in participating communities to purchase federally backed flood insurance. Flood insurance is required for anyone in a flood zone with a bank mortgage backed by the federal government, such as Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. With 1,100 active flood insurance policies in our town, maintaining eligibility in the NFIP is critical for our community and will save our residents money on their flood insurance. Although these are not new requirements, they need to be formally adopted into local bylaws or ordinances to retain all the financial benefits that the NFIP brings. One item of note is the need to permit or have some type of formal review process for fences in a flood zone due to their potential ability to divert water flow and capture debris during a storm. Currently, the building department only permits fences 7 feet or higher as required by the building code.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Are we ready to take a vote? This is a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 11? Aye. Opposed? The article carries unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Joanne. Article 12, also Mr. Smith.
I move Article 12 is printed in the warrant.
I heard that. Board of Selectmen?
There's a typo in the warrant. It's Board of Selectmen recommends actually 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Thank you.
401.
And the planning board recommended 7-0. Explanation?
I'm getting a clean mic. Hold on. Thank you, officer. This is a housekeeping article. This is a safe one. It does not affect the zoning map in any way whatsoever. It addresses the inconsistencies between the boundaries shown on the zoning map and the written word within the bylaw for the rear boundary limits of the B1 and B2 business zoned districts. These edits make the language in our bylaw match the borders seen on the map and provide steps to follow in case there be any uncertainty related to those boundary edges.
Thank you.
Sir.
I should have recognized that as Brad Goodwin, but I didn't recognize him because we're going to bring him back later for an encore. Are we ready to vote? This is also a 2/3. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Article 13. This is Mark Forrest.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 13 as printed in the warrant.
Select Board?
Mr. Moderator, our vote was 5-0 in favor.
And the Planning Board voted 7-0 in favor. Explanation?
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to defer to the Planning Board representative and staff who will make an explanation and provide an explanation on the article.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Vincent from the Planning Board. This article would expand business opportunities by allowing brew pubs that produce beer, wine, or hard cider beverages to be located within our B1 and B2 commercial areas, as long as the product is manufactured for consumption and retail sale on the property and not part of a larger manufacturing endeavor for off-site distribution.
Any questions, comments? Again, a 2/3 vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, here comes Treehouse. I hope. Article 14.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 14 as printed in the warrant.
Select Board?
Unanimously recommends.
And the Planning Board voted 7-0.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to defer to the Planning Board representative for an explanation.
Liz Hartsgrove?
Thank you. Thank you. Liz Hartsgrove, Vice Chair of the Planning Board. This article would expand business opportunities by allowing mobile food vendors like food trucks the opportunity to be located on town-owned land if approved by the Board of Selectmen through the use of a town property application process. Similar to restaurants, food trucks are currently an allowed use in the B1, B2 business districts, but are not allowed in residential zoning districts. As many of our beaches and our parks are located in residential zones, this amendment would allow, from a zoning perspective, the ability to locate food trucks at these locations. The Board of Selectmen and/or the Health Department may wish to develop further policies and procedures for implementation of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Again, this is a 2/3 vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Can I do that again? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
There was a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed. There was a question.
Okay. Yes. Ann Goring, District 7. I'm a little unclear on the public streets or the residential streets. I live on Follins Pond Road, which is public access for boaters to the pond. Does that mean, because there's a lot of traffic there, does that mean that a food truck could be at the end of Follins Pond selling ice cream and hot dogs?
Ms. Housegrove?
Yes. Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Moderator. No, actually. The process would go through the approval for selectmen. It's not that anybody can just do a pop-up there just whenever they want to. They have to have approval from the actual selectmen and have basically a license agreement, a permit to do it in a specific location that is reviewed by town staff on safety precautions. So similar to other communities, they do it as well, and there is a very thorough review process internally before any approvals are in place, and all safety precautions, such as what you just described, would be considered.
Does that answer your question? I apologize for missing you before. Any other? Yep, go ahead.
Jean O'Toole, excuse me, Precinct 7. Is the approval based on a one incident or one event use, or is the approval give carte blanche to be at a certain place as many times as they choose?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'm sorry. That would actually be determined by the selectmen on a case-by-case basis. They have the opportunity to describe the scenario however they see fit, depending on the location that they deem worthy for this type of activity to occur.
Does that answer? Okay, thank you. Because I got it backwards here. We'll take the vote again. All in favor of Article 14? All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Article 15 is also Chairman Forrest.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 15 as printed in the warrant.
Select Board?
5-0.
And the Planning Board voted 7-0.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to defer to the Planning Board representative and staff to provide an explanation of the article.
Mr. Moderator, Joanne Crowley again. This article clarifies that all business center signs shall have a maximum height of 12 feet and simplifies the language for issuing special permit relief for signs by eliminating references to the sign needing to be, quote, visually and aesthetically beneficial to the neighborhood, end quote, which can be subjective and difficult for the Zoning Board of Appeals to evenly administer.
Questions, comments? Again, this is a 2/3 vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Article 16 is also Chairman Forrest.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 16 as printed in the warrant.
Select Board?
Select Board was split, 2 in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstention.
And the Planning Board was 4 in favor, 3 opposed.
Correct.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to defer to the Planning Board representative and staff to provide an explanation on this article.
So it'll be Brad Goodwin.
Thank you. I'm going to try to keep this brief because on my way in tonight, a gentleman approached me and he said, "You're on planning, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I want to get to tattoos and then go home." So I said, "Okay." So here we go. This article rezones land behind 125 Route 6A that holds the parking area for the existing businesses. You all know it as the Bank of America and Dennis Partners properties. This parcel is mired with 2 zoning guidelines or districts, B1 business and residential in the rear, which covers most of the parking area. Approval of this article would allow it to be fully B1 once again and lift the complication and restrictions it's now working under.
Questions? Comments? Hearing none. So 2/3 vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Article 17 is also Chairman Forrest.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 17 as printed in the warrant.
Board of Selectmen?
Recommends.
And the planning board voted 6-1.
And Mr. Moderator, I'd like to defer to the planning board representative to speak and explain the article.
Thank you. Liz Hartsgrove again, through you, Mr. Moderator. This article would expand business opportunities by allowing body art establishments that provide tattooing and cosmetic tattooing to be located within the commercial corridor along Route 28. This amendment would provide these businesses with the same opportunities provided to other personal care services, such as hair salons and spas, rather than limiting them to the adult entertainment district. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? I see one.
Yeah, Vita Morris. I don't remember whether there were any accommodations made for the Hampton Inn property when they developed that. But it certainly worked out very much to our benefit, whether it wasn't or wasn't accommodated, because the other businesses, once they landscaped their area, the other businesses took off and did the same thing pretty much, or as much as they could. And now we have a rather presentable area there. However, it could work just the other way around. If you start in with tattoo parlors, and the next thing you know, you have massage parlors and that kind of thing. So I think that's my comment for it. I think sorry that we ever had this.
No problem. Thank you for your comments. We respect and admire every single one of them. Any comment, any response necessary? Okay. We're prepared to take, Kurt.
I'm hiding behind a firefighter. Kurt Sears, Precinct 1. You know, a little bit of history lesson. We had a tattoo parlor. They used to be allowed. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, I think, to the fact that we had one, that these got pushed into an adult entertainment district, which can never be used. I'm not a big fan of piercings and tattoos, but I don't think it's my business to tell other people they can't do it. So I think our puritanical ways of running this town for the last 150 years, whatever, is really standing in our way. And I think this would be a wise move to pass this. I happen to know of one particular person who would like to move his business back into Yarmouth, who's been a very good neighbor in the other business that he has, and I think it would be beneficial to the town to have this. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we can move on to a vote. Is this 2/3? Yep. This is also a 2/3. All in favor? All opposed? It was close, but I'm gonna ask for it again. All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. That's a motion made to adjourn. Do we have a second? I hear the second. All in favor? Thank you so much for coming out. And thank you for everything you contributed, us guys.